Some people think worldliness is only about what we do, who we spend time with, where we go, and what activities we enjoy. But worldliness starts deep inside us, in the heart, and it shows itself in three ways. The lust of the flesh, constantly wanting to satisfy physical desires. The lust of the eyes, always wanting more things, bowing to the god of materialism. The pride of life, being obsessed with our status and importance. When the serpent tempted Eve, he used these exact tactics. The devil did the same when he tempted Jesus in the wilderness. But God values self-control, generosity, and humble service. It's possible to avoid worldly pleasures on the outside while still wanting them in our hearts. We might look good, but inside we crave the same things. Yet, like Jesus, we should love sinners and spend time with them while staying true to God's values. Think about this. What values are most important to you? Do your actions reflect the world's values or God's values? When the craving for possessions and sinful pleasures grips us intensely, we often forget that these desires are fleeting. The allure of material things blinds us to their impermanence, making us overlook that they will one day pass away. In the midst of these strong desires, it becomes harder to believe the promise that those who do God's will live forever. This eternal truth contrasts sharply with the temporary nature of worldly pleasures. The idea of everlasting life, rooted in following God's will, feels distant when compared to the immediate temptations that captivate us. We often get caught up in the urgency of our wants and the intensity of our cravings, making the eternal seem almost unreal. The promise of forever feels like a faint whisper against the loud demands of the present. Yet, it is this whisper that holds the key to true fulfillment, a promise far greater than the temporary glitter of earthly desires. Think about this. While the world and its allure will fade, the person who aligns with God's will steps into an eternity of joy and peace. This divine promise invites us to shift our focus from the temporary to the everlasting, to find our true home not in the fleeting pleasures of the world, but in the eternal embrace of God's love. By embracing this perspective, we are called to see beyond the immediate, to recognize the fleeting nature of our desires, and to anchor our hearts in the timeless truth of God's promise. This is the path to true and lasting fulfillment, leading us away from the shadows of the temporal and into the radiant light of the eternal. God, in His infinite wisdom, warns us about the dangers of worldly desires. These desires, arising from our physical senses and our egos, lead us away from His eternal truth and into spiritual darkness. When we indulge in the cravings of the flesh, we become prisoners to it. Many people struggle with understanding God because their minds are tangled in earthly reasoning and emotions. They focus so much on their feelings that they grow distrustful. This focus not only brings misery to themselves, but also spreads to those around them. In their self-made prison of dissatisfaction, they isolate themselves, fleeing from the very challenges that could set them free. They seek comfort in the fleeting pleasures of the world, only to find these moments leave them feeling even emptier and more lost. Thus, they continue their journey into deeper darkness, moving further away from God's guiding light. Trusting in these desires creates a fragile happiness based on temporary pleasures, hiding the eternal joy that comes from God. This leads to a life trapped in false peace, hindering our spiritual growth. It is truly sad and miserable to live this way, caught in illusions. Our eyes, those fickle gateways to the world, can deceive us, tempting us with material possessions and external beauty. We chase these fleeting things, thinking they will bring fulfillment, but they slip away, leaving behind envy, dissatisfaction, and a constant craving for more. We become lost in a maze of desires, our vision clouded by the world's glittering facades. When we trust in what we see, we lose sight of the true treasures beyond the physical. The allure of earthly delights blinds us to the profound value found in a relationship with God. In His presence, we discover a peace that surpasses understanding and a joy that lasts forever. Seeking Him leads us to a wellspring of life, nourishing our souls and guiding us out of the shadows and into the radiant light of His love. Satan seeks to isolate each of us, whispering insidious thoughts into our minds. He convinces us that conflict is bad, planting seeds of arrogance and self-sufficiency. He teaches us to trust in ourselves alone, making us believe we are the masters of our fate, ultimately leading us to cast God aside. This false sense of confidence and security, built on our own strength, crumbles at the slightest challenge. Trusting in our flesh, in our limited experiences and perspectives, pulls us further away from God. The more we rely on our senses and worldly understanding, the more miserable and distant we become. In this desolate isolation, Satan's lies echo louder. He makes us think that our own wisdom is enough, that our desires are paramount. But this path leads only to emptiness, a barren landscape where the soul withers. Each step taken in self-reliance is a step away from God's boundless grace, away from the true source of strength and peace. We become like wanderers in a desert, chasing mirages of self-made salvation that dissolve into dust. The more we grasp at these illusions, the more lost we become, blinded by the glitter of worldly success and superficial knowledge. In this state, our spirits are parched, longing for the living water that only God can provide. To trust in Him is to find an oasis, a place of refuge and renewal. By surrendering our self-sufficiency and embracing our dependence on His infinite wisdom, we find true freedom and fulfillment. Only then can we break free from Satan's isolating whispers and walk in the light of God's eternal love and truth. True fulfillment and joy come from trusting in God, whose ways and thoughts are higher than ours. To truly trust, we must accept the unknown and the unfathomable. When everything makes sense to us, there is no need for trust. We rely on our understanding instead of God's. Many believe they trust God, but they are really just seeking confirmation of their own ideas. They want everything to align with their desires and expectations, mistaking this for peace. They say they want to grow with God, but they constantly fall back on believing in themselves. This path of self-reliance leads to dissatisfaction. No matter how much they tithe, pray, exercise, advance in their careers, or seek better relationships, they remain unfulfilled. They build their lives on a shaky foundation, and true peace eludes them. To trust God fully is to let go of the need for everything to make sense. It is to step into the mystery of His greater plan, where His higher ways guide us through the unknown. In this divine trust, we find a peace that surpasses understanding and a joy that is unwavering. Living in self-reliance is like wandering in a maze, never finding the way to true peace. But to trust in God is to walk in the light of His love and to drink from the wellspring of His wisdom. In this surrender, we discover true fulfillment and joy beyond what our limited understanding can grasp. In the embrace of God's higher ways, we are lifted from the shadows of our own doubts and fears. We find a sanctuary of eternal peace, where trust blossoms into a life of profound joy and unshakable faith. The Bible calls us to live by faith, not by what we see, think, or feel. This means trusting in God's promises and guidance, even when we can't see or understand His plans. It requires us to surrender our desires and perspectives and align ourselves with His will. By doing this, we find true peace and purpose. Imagine the deep peace that comes from letting go of our need to control everything, from silencing the noise of our thoughts and feelings. In this quiet trust, we step into God's unwavering love. He wants us to live in communion with Him, to lean not on our understanding but on His infinite wisdom. God calls us to deny the turmoil of our minds and the distractions of our hearts. By doing this, we open ourselves to the true joy and happiness that can only be found in His presence. It is a path of faith, a journey of trust that leads us to divine love. Please, do not let the opportunity to grow with God pass you by. Embrace the call to live by faith. Let go of the fleeting comfort of your own thoughts and experiences. Step into the boundless peace and purpose that await in a life aligned with His will. In this, we find true fulfillment, deep joy, and profound peace. It is a journey worth taking, a life worth living, guided by the hand of God Himself.